They found his teeth before they found his name. In a frozen alley off Clark Street, behind crates of bootlegged gin, a stray dog gnawed on something that gleamed. It was the molar of Vincent, Slick v. Moretti, once the loudest laugh in Chicago's North Side. Now just pulp and scattered bone. No one saw who did it, but every gangster in the city knew why. The South Side had crossed the line. Blood had been spilled without warning, without honor. The Irish had opened fire in the middle of a sit-down. 3 seconds. Mill, tell. 9 bullets. 1 survivor. The street code shattered like glass under a Tommy gun. And now, the North Side boys were sharpening blades in their basements, sewing brass into trench coats, and prepping cars with hidden rifles. The war hadn't started in a courtroom. It started here in this alley, with snow soaked red and silence thick as death. A week earlier, Vincent, Slick v. Moretti had laughed over cigars with Danny O'Connell, boss of the Irish South Side crew. They were supposed to split the docks. 50-50. Vincent said. You get the gin, I get the gin palace. Fair. Danny raised his glass. We both drown in gold. But Vincent didn't see the glint in Danny's eye, or the message in his silence. Danny had already cut a side deal with the feds. Less heat, more turf. He'd sell Vincent out like a cigarette flicked into the gutter. That toast. It was a eulogy. And the whisper that started the war didn't come from a gun. It came from a crystal glass between 2 men who smiled too much. The funeral came fast. A closed casket with no face to mourn. Vincent's mother wailed behind a black veil, her rosary clenched so hard her palms bled. Men stood stone-faced in the chapel, their hats lowered, their eyes burning. Tommy Bricks Marzano whispered to Luca, "This means war, and it's gonna be biblical." Luca nodded, jaw tight. "I ain't prayin'. I'm loading." No one cried. Not really. They just measured vengeance by the ounce. When the priest tried to speak of peace, every eye in the room turned cold. Peace was buried with the body. Danny O'Connell stood at the edge of the Chicago River, staring into the current like it held absolution. His brother, Mickey, lit a cigarette with shaky hands. "You think they'll come?" Danny smirked. "They already have." Across the water, faint figures moved behind fogged windows. North Side eyes. Danny knew he'd thrown the first punch. But in Chicago, you didn't win by being right. You won by hitting harder. "Let them come," Danny muttered. "We'll feed 'em to the ice." The river rolled on, slow and black, like the past he couldn't escape. Tommy Bricks Marzano drove alone down State Street. The city blurred through the rain-slick windshield. Every light felt like an accusation. Every shadow whispered Vincent's name. In the glove box, the Colt 45 waited. Loaded. Cold. Ready. Tommy wasn't the smartest, wasn't the fastest, but he remembered faces. And Danny O'Connell's face was tattooed behind his eyes now. "They want blood," Tommy muttered. "I'll give 'em a river." The wipers squealed. The city exhaled, and Tommy's eyes never blinked. Before the war, Tommy Bricks Marzano was just a son in a butcher's apron. His father, old Salvatore, taught him how to carve beef with surgical precision, how to respect blood. "Every cut got a name," his father would say. "Know the name, you know the pain." Tommy didn't want to carry a gun. He wanted to carry a cleaver. But when the Moretti family put food on their table after the butchery went up in smoke, loyalty was carved into him deeper than any knife. Now, in a quiet backroom filled with hanging sides of beef, Tommy practiced with a new blade. Short, sharp, deadly. Salvatore watched from the shadows, his eyes heavy. "This ain't the family business," he muttered. Tommy didn't answer. He just flipped the knife once more. On the South Side, a young woman moved like a ghost through the O'Connell house. Her name was Maeve. Danny O'Connell's niece. 22. Too sharp for her own good. Too quiet to be noticed by men who should have listened. She knew what her uncle had done. She knew the whispers about Vincent's last meeting. And worse, she had heard the phone call that wasn't meant for her ears. "Make it clean," Danny had said. "I don't want a face left." Maeve stared out the frosted window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Her hands shook, not from fear, but fury. Somewhere inside her burned a secret. She had loved Vincent once. Not that Danny ever knew. Not that he ever would. But now she watched him burn the city and wondered, when the time came, could she do the same? Luca Moretti stood at the altar after hours, alone except for flickering candles. The church was quiet, but his soul was not. His brother Vincent had been the golden one. The diplomat. The one who kept the Moretti name clean even while their hands bled. Luca was different. He was made for shadows. Born in prison, raised in whispers. Now with Vincent gone, every whisper screamed. "I should have seen it coming," Luca muttered. He lit a candle for the dead, and another for the living he'd soon bury. The priest passed behind him, pausing only to say, "Revenge does not absolve." Luca didn't turn. "I ain't here for absolution, Father." The match burned down to his skin. He didn't flinch. Back in the basement, Salvatore wrapped steaks in wax paper while the radio buzzed with news of an uptick in gang activity. He didn't speak much anymore. Too many funerals, too many meals eaten in silence. But when Tommy walked in with blood on his collar, he dropped the paper. "Was it worth it?" Salvatore asked, voice cracking. Tommy looked away. "He was one of theirs. He pulled on me first." The old man's hands trembled as he picked up the paper. "We used to cut meat. Now we cut men." The silence between them stretched like butcher's twine. They had both lost something, more than blood, more than business. They had lost the line between surviving and becoming what they feared. Maeve held the letter in her lap like a wound that wouldn't clot. Vincent had written it the week before he died, hidden in the hollow of a piano key. "If anything happens to me, don't cry," he'd written. "Well, but don't stay quiet either." She read it again, slower this time. Her hands trembled. The room around her blurred. Outside, men like her uncle burned down corners of the city in his name. But Vincent hadn't wanted a war. He wanted out. And he had trusted her with that truth. Now she had a choice, to keep silent and live safe, or speak and start a fire that could kill them all. "You always leave the hard part to me," she whispered. The letter fluttered in her lap like a dying bird. The first retaliation came fast and loud. A North Side booze run ambushed on Lake Street. Tommy Bricks Marzano rode shotgun in a truck filled with crates when the bullets tore through the windshield. Glass sprayed like rain. The driver slumped, dead before the brakes screamed. Tommy rolled out the door, his .45 already barking into the haze. Across the street, two silhouettes disappeared into alley shadows. The gin was lost. The blood stayed. When Luca arrived at the scene, he kicked a crate open, nothing but shards. "They're not taking the booze," he said. "They're taking our pulse." The war had shifted from whispers to shouts. Chicago's streets weren't just dangerous anymore, they were carnivorous. Danny O'Connell lit a cigar with a shaking hand. "You hit N," Mickey said. Danny nodded slowly. "We didn't just hit him. We bled him in daylight." But he wasn't smiling. Not anymore. The city was waking up. Reporters buzzed. Cops smelled opportunity. And the feds, well, they were never far behind a body count. Danny walked to the window of his safe house and looked out over South Side rooftops. "You think we made them afraid?" Mickey asked. Danny turned, voice flat. "We made them desperate. And desperate men don't sleep. They burn. The war wasn't a chessboard. It was a lit match on a soaked map." In a smoky backroom bar, the North Side captains gathered. Luca Moretti leaned over a table, slamming down a map. "No more waiting. We hit the green mill, we torch the Stillwater Depot. And we clip anyone wearing a shamrock." Silence. Then Tommy said, "What about the girls, the staff?" Luca stared through him. This ain't ballet. This is survival. The others nodded. Rage and grief mixed like gasoline. The bartender locked the doors. Outside, Chicago went on pretending it wasn't on fire. But inside that bar, war got organized. And when gangsters make plans, they don't write minutes. They write epitaphs. That night, Green Mill Jazz Club erupted. Men in fedoras and long coats entered like ghosts with shotguns. The music barely stopped before the screaming started. Bottles shattered. Trumpets dropped. One man tried to climb the bar and was cut down mid-air. In a corner booth, Maeve O'Connell ducked under a table, hands over her mouth. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was meeting a source, a man who promised proof of Danny's federal deal. But now, all she could hear were footsteps, gunfire, and dying songs. Blood pooled on the dance floor. The band would never play again. The jazz stopped. The war sang instead. Maeve didn't go home. She ran. All night, boots on cobblestones, through alleys that smelled of gin and ghosts. She reached the old train yard at sunrise. Her source was dead. She knew it. But the file, his backup, wasn't. Hidden behind boilerplates like he said. "Under Benjanuho," he said. She pulled the steel cover back and found it, pages stamped with bureau ink, names she recognized, numbers that could tear her uncle apart. She clutched the file to her chest, heart pounding. "Vincent," she whispered, "I hear you." Behind her, a crow cawed. The city had traded song for violence, rhythm for revenge. But Maeve, she was still listening for truth. The documents Maeve found weren't just betrayal, they were damnation. Names of informants, payoff ledgers, coded memos signed with a name she knew too well. Luca Moretti. Not Danny. Not Mickey. Luca. Ol. The man swearing vengeance. The man who kissed his brother's rosary at the funeral. He had flipped months before Vincent died, selling roots and silence to the bureau. Vincent had found out, and Luca made sure that knowledge never left his throat. Maeve stared at the pages, nausea rising like a tide. "It wasn't Danny," she whispered. "It was Luca all along." Her knees buckled. The war wasn't North versus South. It was blood versus blood. Guy. And she was holding the blade now. Luca sat alone in a church pew, the echoes of yesterday's massacre still ringing in his ears. A priest passed, offering confession. Luca didn't move. In his coat pocket, he held the gold rosary Vincent once wore, the one he had taken from the body himself. "You were always the light," he whispered. "I was the fire." His fingers tightened. The FBI had promised safety, power, immunity. All it had cost him was his brother's blood. But even as Luca tried to bury the guilt, it clawed at his ribs. He didn't regret the deal. He regretted the silence. Because silence had made him a ghost long before the bullets flew. And ghosts don't forgive. Maeve confronted Danny in the garden behind the O'Connell home. Wind rustled the hedges. The city's sirens cried in the far-off dark. "You didn't kill Vincent," she said. Danny turned startled. "Where did you hear that?" "I read it." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but fury. "It was Luca. He's playing both sides. He used Vincent. He used us." Danny took a breath. Then, for the first time in years, his eyes glistened. "He told me the Bureau had Vincent. I thought they did it." Maeve's hands shook. "We've been killing the wrong people." And in that moment, two war generals, one young, one old, realized they were pawns in a much darker game. Tommy Bricks was the last to know. Maeve handed him the file in the butcher shop where it had all begun. The meat hooks hung still. He read the names in silence. Then he crumpled the first page and dropped it to the floor. "Luca did this?" Maeve nodded. "He sold Vincent to save himself." Tommy backed against the counter, breathing like a bull before charge. "I held his hand when he died. I swore I'd burn an O'Connell to the bone. Maeve stepped forward. Then burn the right man. The blade was already in his hand. But this time, he wasn't cutting meat. He was carving a new direction for revenge. In the mirror-lit bar beneath Cicero Street, Luca made his final deal. The bureau man slid a fresh stack of documents across the table. "One more name," he said. "We shut this down clean." Luca didn't flinch. "You'll have it tomorrow." But outside, Danny and Tommy waited in silence. Behind them, Maeve loaded the last round into a revolver. The war hadn't ended. It had just shifted its weight. Now, it wasn't about North Side or South Side. It was about the man who burned both. "He thinks we don't know," Tommy whispered. Danny replied, "He's right. Until we open the door." The handle turned. The devil was about to see his reflection. The speakeasy door slammed shut behind them. Danny, Tommy, and Maeve moved through the smoky air like wolves closing in. Luca stood at the bar, eyes still on the bureau agent, unaware of the storm behind him. Tommy spoke first. "You sold Vincent." Luca turned slowly, face unreadable. "You don't understand." Maeve stepped forward, voice sharp as glass. "No, Luca, we understand perfectly. You weren't protecting the family. You were burying it." The room fell silent, save for the low jazz humming through the walls. Luca reached for his glass but didn't drink. "Then finish it," he said. Danny raised his pistol. "We're not done yet." No one fired. Not yet. But every breath felt like a loaded chamber. The bureau agent fled first. He saw the fire in Tommy's eyes and bolted through the back. No one followed. This wasn't about law anymore. It was about blood. Luca turned to face them fully now. "I didn't mean for Vincent to die," he said, voice low. "I just wanted out." Danny stepped forward. "You could have walked away. But you stayed. You played both ends. You wore your brother's rosary while stabbing his memory." Luca's eyes flickered. "And what did you do, Danny? Burn half the city for a misunderstanding?" Silence again. The kind before thunder. Then Maeve stepped between them, raising her pistol with shaking hands. "No more speeches," she said. "Only truths." The first shot didn't come from Tommy. It came from Maeve. Not at Luca, but at the chandelier above. Glass exploded, plunging the room into chaos. Tommy lunged. Danny shouted. Luca dove behind a column, firing wildly. Bullets split wood and silence alike. Chairs overturned. The air filled with gunpowder and fury. Tommy rolled across the bar top, slamming into Luca and driving him back. "For Vincent," he roared. Luca clawed at his pistol, but Danny stepped in and shot it from his hand. The war had never been about strategy. It had always been about this moment, raw, bloody, personal. 3 guns, 2 hearts, 1 betrayal laid bare under flickering light. Luca bled across the bar floor, one leg useless, both hands trembling. He looked up at Maeve. "He was going to turn me in. I didn't have a choice." Maeve crouched beside him, voice ice cold. "You had a brother. That was your choice." Danny stood over them both, pistol still in hand. "You want the final shot?" he asked. Maeve didn't blink. "No," she whispered. "He doesn't deserve a final anything." She stood and turned. Luca watched her go, eyes wide, not with fear, but with something worse, understanding. Danny looked at Tommy, then back at Luca. "You'll live," he muttered. "But you'll die every day you remember this." Then they left him there, broken among the ghosts he made. They buried Vincent Moretti again that night, not in the ground, but in the city. The war was over, but the cost hung in every alley, echoed in every silence. Danny disappeared into the docks. Tommy went back to the butcher shop, hands too steady for peace. Maeve vanished into newspapers and rumors, a red-haired ghost who burned the truth into the walls of Chicago. Luca survived, but never surfaced again. Some say he limps through the tunnels beneath the city, clutching a rosary no prayer can clean. The jazz never came back to Cicero Street. But if you listen closely, sometimes the wind sounds like a trumpet sobbing through the smoke. Danny O'Connell watched the river roll past, colder than before, quieter too. He no longer commanded crews or territories. The docks, once alive with smuggled gin and coded signals, were now abandoned steel and rust. Danny ran a shipping ledger by day, nothing more. But at night, he'd light a match and stare at the flame, hearing Vincent's name in the wind. He hadn't killed him, but he hadn't stopped it either. That was the curse. He lived. Others didn't. And with every silent sunrise, that truth grew heavier. He muttered, "I gave them everything." The river didn't respond. It never does. It just swallows what's thrown to it, and keeps moving. Tommy Bricks reopened the butcher shop. The neighborhood still whispered, but now they whispered with respect and distance. Kids stared at his hands as he carved meat, like they might find the past hidden in his palms. He worked silently. No jazz, no whiskey, no crew. He didn't talk about Vincent or Luca or the war. But every so often he'd pause mid-slice and look at the corner where Vincent used to lean, laughing with a cigar. Tommy never smiled. He didn't need to. The city had taken enough of him. But in the quiet rhythm of cleaver and bone, he found something close to peace. Or at least, something quieter than revenge. Maeve left Chicago, disappeared into ink and myth. Some say she went to New York. Others that she changed her name and became a writer. What's certain is this: the file she carried didn't vanish. Pages turned up in a federal archive, stripped of names but full of ghosts. A woman with red hair was seen boarding a train with a leather satchel and tears in her eyes. The porter asked if she was heading home. "No," she said. "I'm leaving one." And the door closed behind her. In a city built on whispers, Maeve O'Connell became the loudest silence anyone ever remembered. The Bureau called it a success. 2 major gangs dismantled, dozens arrested, routes shut down. Chicago, they said, was safer, cleaner, cool. But the city knew better. The streets had scars, and scars don't fade, they deepen. Jazz clubs never fully reopened. The Green Mill stood silent, its piano keys untouched. Patrons found other poisons, other ghosts. And in quiet moments, the bartenders still told the story of the girl with the fire-red hair, who saw everything, and the butcher who carved up vengeance like steak. The law wrote reports. The city wrote legend. Both were lies. But one felt true. Luca Moretti was never seen again. Not by the Bureau. Not by the streets. But somewhere beneath Chicago, in tunnels built during the war, he remained. Or so they said. A ghost in a long coat, dragging one leg, muttering prayers no one answered. He lit a candle every night in the dark. One for Vincent. One for himself. One for every lie that started as survival and ended as execution. Some claim they've heard him, whispers echoing through storm drains, a rosary clinking like distant gunfire. But no one ever goes looking. Not anymore. Because some devils don't stay buried. And some ghosts remember your name. Years passed. The war became a cautionary tale. Kids heard whispers about the gin fire, the days when jazz was louder than sirens and bullets fell like rain. One boy asked his grandfather, "Is it true a butcher started a gang war?" The old man chuckled. "No, kid, a butcher ended it." But truth and legend no longer lived in separate rooms. Streets bore scars shaped like names. Corners still remembered where men bled. And above it all, a quiet truth hummed beneath Chicago's concrete skin. Those who survived didn't walk away clean. They carried ghosts. Some wore suits. Some sold meat. Some held pens. But all of them had learned silence was the only shield left. At the reopened butcher shop, an old cleaver still hung on the back wall. No blood on it now, just rust and memory. Tommy Bricks never reopened the register. He served only the neighbors he knew, and he spoke even less than before. The radio stayed off. But every Sunday, he lit a candle in the alley behind the shop. Achoo. No prayers. Just silence. One day, someone asked him why. He said, "For the ones who didn't walk out." He didn't say their names. Didn't need to. The city already had them etched into its spine. They didn't get statues. They got shadows. And sometimes, those shadows walked home with you. Maeve never wrote her name again. But her words lived on. Anonymous articles appeared in underground papers. Stories of betrayal, silence, and survival. People called them fiction. But the ones who had been there knew better. She became myth. The red-haired woman who disappeared, but never truly left. Her face painted on alley walls. Her stories passed from bar to bar. A whisper here. A nod there. She was the city's conscience. A voice it didn't deserve, but couldn't forget. And if you ever saw a flame-haired woman at the edge of the fog, turning a corner maybe, just maybe, you were close to the truth. They say Luca died in the tunnels. Others claim he's still down there, lighting candles in the dark, whispering to bones. But in the archives, one photo remains, a man exiting a church, limping, holding a rosary. No date. No caption. Just that look in his eyes, like a man who's already been judged. The Bureau never spoke his name again. He had given them everything they needed. And in return he got what all ghosts get: silence, solitude, and shadows that move when you don't. Some devils go to hell. Others build it. Luca Moretti didn't vanish. He became a part of the city he helped burn. There's no retirement plan for ghosts. The war ended. The players scattered. But the city still remembers. In cracks on the pavement. In names scratched into wood under forgotten bar stools. In the eyes of old men who flinch at jazz. Chicago grew up, built higher, louder. But beneath all that steel and glass is the memory of the war that started with a betrayal, bloomed in blood, and left only silence. Vincent Moretti, White, Maeve O'Connell, Tommy Marzano, Luca, Capone. None of them wanted to be legends. But the streets don't care what you want. They care what you bleed. And in Chicago, that's all that ever mattered.